The Allen Line Company appreciates all of the dedicated carriers it takes to move loads across the U.S. Stay safe.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
3 members of Congress held a press conference with the potential to change something important for truckers, the push to transition to electric-powered vehicles. I'll get an update from OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Factoring was one of the educational topics at the Mid-America Trucking Show this year. We sat down with OOIDA's Paul Torlina to discuss what advice he has when it comes to factoring and some of the red flags to be aware of. And finally, when is a headlight not a headlight? When is a turn signal something else? Both are also basic communication devices, but Marty Ellis thinks some truckers are forgetting the basic utility of their lights. I'll talk with the man who drives the spirit of the American trucker. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today: Republicans in Congress have officially launched a campaign to dismantle the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's new truck emission standards. Senators Pete Ricketts of Nebraska and Dan Sullivan of Arkansas joined Congressman John James of Michigan during a news conference on Wednesday, announcing the introduction of 2 Congressional Review Act, or CRA, resolutions. There's one in the House and one in the Senate, both seeking to block the EPA's latest rule setting stricter emission standards for both heavy-duty trucks and passenger vehicles. During the news conference, the lawmakers said the rules equate to a mandate. Senator Ricketts referred to them as delusional.
This is something that there is no plan for. The Biden administration has no idea where they're going to generate the power or they're going to do the transmission lines. So they don't actually know how this would actually happen. And think about this, right? At the same time they want us to buy more electric vehicles, they just issued those rules of the Clean Power Plan that will actually attack our power generation. So they want us to use more electricity on one hand and stop us from generating electricity on the other hand. And finally, EV batteries take critical minerals, rare earth elements. And China produces anywhere between, or processes 60 to 80% of these. And so I'm looking around, I'm seeing a lot of young faces. For those of us old enough to remember the Arab oil embargo, we remember what it was like to be energy dependent on a different area of the world that wasn't too friendly to us. Why on earth would we make ourselves dependent on our chief adversary in the world, the People's Republic of China?
The EPA's new truck emission standards will effectively force 25% of new sleeper cab tractor sales to be zero-emission vehicles by 2032. Commonly referred to as zero-emission trucks, electric and hydrogen-fueled trucks are actually zero direct-emission vehicles, as defined by the Department of Energy. Although emissions measured from the tailpipe may be zero, emissions related to battery production, distribution, recycling, and disposal does not have a net zero result. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association has expressed strong opposition to the EPA heavy truck rule. Senator Sullivan read a statement from OOIDA President Todd Spencer during his remarks.
I just want to finish my remarks with a statement from the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association President Todd Spencer about this. Here's what he says. Small business truckers, he's in charge of this association, make up 96% of trucking and could be regulated out of existence if the EPA's misguided mandates come into effect. This could have devastating effects on the reliability of America's supply chain and ultimately on the cost and availability of consumer goods. So this is a mandate that's not only not going to work, it's not only going to have an impact on the production of vehicles, this is going to have costs to Americans through supply chains that are going to raise prices even more.
The CRAs already have dozens of co-sponsors in each chamber of Congress, all of them from the Republican side of the aisle, save for one Democrat, Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. However, the Congressional Review Acts are unlikely to succeed. While they are an oversight tool Congress can use to overturn agency rules, it requires passage in both chambers of Congress and a signature from the president or a supermajority in Congress to override a presidential veto. Since CRA resolutions are typically partisan in nature, they rarely survive. Legal action is another avenue. Since the EPA's truck emission rule just recently became official, no lawsuits against it have hit the federal court docket yet. But in a joint statement following announcement of the EPA rule, the American Petroleum Institute and American fuel and petrochemical manufacturers indicated they are poised to take legal action if necessary. Much more on this developing story later on in the show when Jay Grimes, OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, stops by with reaction and analysis. A truck driver is facing charges in Minnesota following a deadly crash over the summer. Prosecutors say Bill Joe Grimes of Tennessee was watching Netflix just before the crash that killed 2 people. This happened in a construction zone on Interstate 35 near Faribault last August. The Rice County Attorney's Office says Grimes told authorities he had looked down just before the crash, and when he looked back up, there was a car right in front of him, and that he wasn't able to stop because of the heavy load he was carrying. But prosecutors say an investigation that included a review of dashcam footage and videos from roadside cameras determined that he was streaming the Netflix show Rust Valley Restorers on his phone for at least 20 minutes leading up to and during the crash. A crash investigator also found that Grimes did not use his brakes before colliding with the victim's vehicles. He's facing 2 counts of criminal vehicular homicide. The family of an Iowa truck driver found dead in a field is making plans for a second autopsy. David Schultz's body was found late last month, some 5 months after going missing. The Iowa State Medical Examiner said the preliminary autopsy results show no signs of trauma or serious injury. They do not suspect foul play at this time. But a spokesperson for the Schultz family told the Gazette that they're raising money so a private forensic pathology firm can conduct a second autopsy, something they estimate will cost around $10,000. They say the situation just doesn't add up. Schultz's body was found in a field less than 2 miles from where his truck had been left abandoned. The state of Iowa has an emergency order in place in response to a severe weather outbreak. 6 tornadoes touched down throughout the state on April 26th. The emergency, running through May 29th, temporarily suspends hours of service regulations for repair crews and carriers providing direct assistance in Iowa. There are some exceptions. For more details, we have a full write-up at landline.media. A Texas-based trucking company is going under. According to a notice from the state of Texas, Arnold Transportation Services has shut down its facility in Grand Prairie and laid off more than 150 workers. The company, founded in 1932, was acquired by Ontario-based Pride Group Logistics in early 2022. In March of this year, Pride Group Holdings announced they had filed for bankruptcy protections, although they said at the time they didn't expect any disruptions to services. According to FMCSA public records, Arnold employs 341 drivers. A stretch of Interstate 95 through southwestern Connecticut could be shut down for the foreseeable future. A petroleum tanker truck was involved in a 3-vehicle crash Thursday morning in Norwalk. The tanker truck caught fire under an overpass, and although no serious injuries were reported, Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont told drivers that both directions of I-95 will likely be shut down for a significant amount of time, so crews can conduct proper inspections of the overpass to make sure it's safe. Lamont suggested truck drivers take I-87 or I-84 as alternate routes. And finally, a multi-year project that will widen Interstate 70 through Missouri is set to start in a couple months. The Missouri Department of Transportation says construction on a 3rd lane in both directions is likely to start up following the 4th of July holiday. Work will begin on the stretch of I-70 between Columbia and Kingdom City and grow from there. Ultimately, when the $405 million project is all done sometime in 2027, there will be 3 lanes of traffic spanning from Blue Springs to Wentzville. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Congratulations to Gerald S. Northam of Dagsboro, Delaware. He's received the OOIDA Safe Driving Award for 48 years of safe, accident-free driving. That's the equivalent of a car driver going 360 years without causing a single accident. Next, I'll discuss congressional efforts to stop an EPA push for electric trucks with OOIDA's Jay Grimes, and Ashley Blackford covers factoring with OOIDA's Paul Torlina. We'll be back in just a moment with more of the show. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Capital Reman is your leading source for quality remanufactured engines and components. Capital Reman stands ready to serve all OOIDA members to help reduce costly engine repairs or replacement. Visit capitalreman.com today and use code OOIDA10 to save.
Get the most power performance out of your rig with Howe's Diesel Defender. It provides maximum lubricity and contains specialized IDX4 detergent to clean and prevent deposits and safely removes harmful water. Visit HowesProducts.com for more information.
Attention professional drivers, do you owe money to the IRS? Integrity Tax Relief Group frees drivers from IRS trouble. Call for help now, 855-976-4291. That's 855-976-4291.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Two U.S. senators and a member of the U.S. House held a press conference Wednesday that has the potential to change something important for truckers, and it involves the push by the administration to transition from fossil fuels to electric-powered vehicles. Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm your host, Mark Rettig. I'm joined, as always, by OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, how are you doing?
Good to be with you.
This involves the EPA's Phase 3 heavy-duty truck emission rule, among other things.
Yeah.
Before we get into the meat of what happened Wednesday, can you go ahead and walk us through what Phase 3 calls for?
So this is a final rule from EPA which would implement overall tailpipe emissions, greenhouse gas emissions on heavy-duty trucks, beginning as soon as model year 2027 for different vehicles. For long-haul Class 8 trucks, model year 2030 is when they will go into effect, and by 2032 is going to require a 25% reduction in emissions. And to kind of achieve that, the manufacturers are really going to be forced to rush manufacturing of battery electric vehicles, other zero-emission vehicles, and we have a lot of concerns. First and foremost, cost, battery safety, charging network, a lot of unanswered questions when it comes to electric commercial vehicles, and if those vehicles are going to be ready by that time to operate in a reliable and practical manner when these new regulations kind of go into effect.
And I did watch a little bit of that press conference. It was interesting. These three members of Congress talked a lot about passenger vehicles, but they did get into heavy-duty vehicles at one point.
Right, and important to remember, so there's two separate rulemakings, the Phase 3 for heavy-duty trucks, and then there's an overall light and medium-duty vehicle rule separate. And, they were talking about, the challenges kind of overall across all vehicles, and certainly there's going to be different challenges for passenger vehicles and different, hurdles for heavy vehicles. And certainly when you look at kind of the state of play where we are right now, the electric vehicles, electric infrastructure, a lot further along in the passenger car space. But when you look at heavy-duty vehicles, and we saw a hearing, earlier this week about electric fleets and just the absence of infrastructure there, and still so many unanswered questions when you look at how long will it take a heavy-duty truck to charge? What problems will that create? Truck parking among them. Then you talk about the cost of the vehicles, where it could be upwards of $400,000 for an electric CMV, and not to mention the extra weight that these batteries are going to tack on to heavy-duty vehicles. So certainly a lot of concerns have been raised by Congress since these rules were finalized and announced about a month ago, and starting to see some congressional action in response to EPA's final rule.
So let's talk a little bit about that. These three members of Congress are introducing a resolution under the Congressional Review Act. What is the Congressional Review Act, and how does it work?
Yeah, so this is a power that the legislative branch has at their disposal to kind of check the executive branch here and the executive agencies that finalize different rulemakings. So basically, once a final rule has been approved by an agency, Congress can utilize the Congressional Review Act to overturn that rule if they think the agency is kind of overstepped their duty. And this is a tool we've seen sort of increasingly here in the past couple of years. And does take majority of the Senate and House to pass the legislation, then, of course, it moves on to the president's desk. A lot of times we see the president veto these Congressional Review Acts, and then it would take a two-thirds vote by Congress to overturn the presidential veto. So now that the rule has been finalized, we are starting to see kind of that legislative process begin, and heard today that these members of Congress are going to be introducing the Congressional Review Act to overturn the EPA final rules. I think we're going to have one specifically on the light and medium duty rule, and then one separately on the heavy duty rule. I think we'll probably see a lot of the same supporters kind of on each of the measures. And the kind of first step, I think we'll see formal introduction here within the next couple of days, where we'll have bill numbers. And we've already indicated, I think, in their announcement today, they said it's going to be a bipartisan effort. Already heard a lot of Republican support so far, but also have support from Democratic Senator Joe Manchin. I think that support will continue to build over the next couple weeks, and then we'll see these measures get voted on in the House and in the Senate, I think, down the line here in a few weeks.
We didn't mention up till now, and I think we probably should, who these three members of Congress are. And I'm wondering, in doing that, if you can also tell us a little bit about what they said about this issue during their press conference.
Right. So on the Senate side, Senator Pete Ricketts of Nebraska, and he'll kind of be leading the charge on the light and medium duty rule. Senator Dan Sullivan from Alaska will be leading the charge on the heavy duty rule. And, they both kind of indicated these rules are kind of unworkable. And, Senator Sullivan, even acknowledged OOIDA's position on the bill, saying this could potentially regulate small trucking businesses out of the industry, and it's really impractical. He mentioned Alaska, Senator Sullivan's Alaska, how these electric batteries are going to work in the cold conditions there. He kind of raised some suspicions about, but kind of overall, we hear major concerns about the costs, really about mandating the manufacturing of these vehicles and kind of not giving consumers the choice to purchase what vehicles that they think will work best for them. On the House side, Representative John James from Michigan is going to be on the light and medium duty rule, and Congressman Russ Fulcher from Idaho will be on the heavy duty rule. So those are the leaders of the Congressional Review Act here, and I think they echoed a lot of the concerns that we've heard from drivers on cost, reliability, feasibility, time, and operations. So I think they're going to make the push. I think there's going to be a lot of industries that we've already heard who are going to be supporting the legislation. I kind of looking at it, I think they've got enough votes to at least pass it initially, both on the House and Senate side. And then that will put the pressure on President Biden, and we'll see if he moves forward to enact a veto, or if he lets the Congressional Review Act, if it's enacted, stand, which would repeal these latest EPA measures.
Obviously, the president and the administration have not had time yet to react to the press conference or to the announcement of this resolution, but they're clearly aware of the opposition to Phase 3 and the passenger vehicle rule. Have they said publicly what their reaction is to that?
Not that I have seen thus far. When you look at some of these historic EPA emissions requirements that have come out within the past couple years, the NOx emissions rule that was finalized a couple years ago really setting some different emission standards on heavy-duty trucks, which we kind of raised some similar concerns with. And again, that was another one that faced a Congressional Review Act process, and the House and Senate passed that Congressional Review Act, but eventually President Biden did veto, and there was not enough support to get that two-thirds to override the presidential veto. So might be on the same track here, but of course this year is an election year, and I think this rule has garnered a whole lot more attention, whole lot more opposition. So unclear what decision the president will make if and when this Congressional View Act reaches his desk.
Let's go on to another topic here. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration recently held its Safety Research Forum, an event that focuses on various studies the agency has performed and the results of those studies, which are things that can, in the long term, have an effect on future regulation. And there's a number of topics that were covered here, but the one that really caught my attention, Jay, was very significant in my mind, which is an announcement by FMCSA regarding the ongoing fraud problem in the trucking industry. And I wonder if you can walk us through what their announcement was.
Yes, so certainly broker fraud, broker transparency continue to be top concerns for drivers, especially small business operations. And, we've heard a lot about this from FMCSA recently, going back to MATS. I believe they made a major announcement saying that, they're rolling out this new registration system, which is going to have a lot of components that could be utilized to help address broker fraud, and heard more of that during last week's presentation. And FMCSA announced that they're going to be unveiling this registration fraud team that will work within the agency's registration office to focus solely on assisting those who have been victims of registration fraud at the agency, as well as identifying measures to help prevent it. We heard it's a small team that doesn't exist quite yet, but it's going to go a long way towards helping the industry. And it does seem like FMCSA, is getting the message here that, they've heard from every corner of the industry about how bad fraud is right now, and something that they're going to start taking a look at very seriously. And they're going to, I think along with the rulemaking on registration are going to take a lot of steps moving forward that they can at least do some things. And this is kind of a debate we have a lot of back and forth with on FMCSA, is that given the statutory nature of how broker regulations are set up, on how some of these fraud laws are set up, FMCSA can't really go out and criminally prosecute these folks that they know are committing fraud. And we think there's some ways that they can do a little bit more, and perhaps they're finally taking note of that. And hopefully this fraud team can be one of the ways that they're going about that. And some of the things we're hearing about are multi-factor authorization, different PIN verification methods, some other IT systems that can be implemented to kind of really have some more transparency, have some more ways to kind of crack down on folks that we know are committing fraud through all sorts of different methods these days.
Looking at all the actions that they've talked about taking in this committee, to what extent does it appear that the changes they're contemplating, for example, in the registration system, would be effective in reducing fraud? I mean, what is OOIDA's view looking at that system?
I think we got to wait and see, and wait till FMCSA can prove that these steps can be, first of all, implemented in a timely fashion. That's been another complaint of ours, for decades. How long does it take FMCSA to get these systems in place? Once they get them in place, are they going to prioritize going after these fraudulent brokers? So we've kind of heard some of these stories before, and haven't been satisfied with some of those outcomes. But I know FMCSA kind of continues to work at it, and they have a lot of challenges that they have to deal with on the federal government side and the bureaucracy side. So, encouraged by what we hear. But until those actions are, really evident and really having an impact, we're always going to push for more.
Okay. Jay, thank you very much for all the information. We certainly appreciate it.
All righty, Mark, anytime.
I've been talking with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. And folks, you can keep up on these important issues and regulation by going to the website landline.media. Again, that's landline.media. And of course, every Thursday here on Landline Now. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off TruckStop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Landline Now, welcome back. Paul Torlina joins me now. He is Advocacy Counsel for OOIDA. Paul, thanks for coming in.
Always great to be here.
Now, today I want to talk to you about your Pro Talk session you did at the Mid-America Trucking Show on factoring. For our listeners who weren't able to make the show, you can watch Paul's session on the Landline Media YouTube page. But Paul, I'd like to kind of walk through that session with you, which I must say, for myself, someone who went into it with a little bit of knowledge on factoring, but I still feel very new to this industry. You did a very good job in explaining it and making it very entertaining. I will say that.
I think entertaining was my first priority, and then teaching was second on that one.
You did a good job.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
What was the main objective with this session?
Really, what we wanted to do was, our position for decades has been just don't factor. Just don't even think about it, and after you're done thinking about it, then don't think about it again. It's just a very strong position we've taken. I mostly wanted to lay out and just teach what exactly factoring is at its very basic level. There's a lot of complex things to factoring, but really the long and short is just to teach that it is essentially consumer credit, and in the trucking industry, it just doesn't work very well.
Now, is factoring something that you feel like a lot of people in the trucking industry know about, or are there some who are very unaware of what it is?
I think from talking to people, I think most people know what it is. Mm-hmm. I don't think they know the details of it, though. They think I pay a small percentage of my load fee and I get paid quickly, which technically that's true, mm-hmm. but there's always the catch.
Yeah.
And really the catches are what has made OOIDA very anti-factoring for decades, is the troubles that we hear about from our members that come with factoring.
Because factoring companies, I mean, they come off as very, helpful and useful. They do well at selling themselves. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. And that was one thing I tried to point out at Matt's was I actually spent a little bit of time doing recon before my presentation and finding every factoring company at the show and just swinging by their booth and seeing if they'd talk to me and give me some information. And I didn't always tell them who I was. Sometimes I was wearing an OOIDA shirt, so they knew who I was, but I shouldn't say they knew who I was. They knew who I was with. It was interesting, some of the responses I got, because some of I won't get into specifics on company names, but some of the companies want to sell themselves as we're a financial institution. So they want to kind of seem reliable and traditional and, we're this big company and things like that. And others want to sell themselves to you like they're your neighbor or your best friend. And my take on somebody who wants to sell you based on neighbor or best friend, that means they're selling you something you really don't need. One thing that I found was when they wanted to talk about testimonials from people who had worked with them and they had it in their brochures or their literature, and they said things like, oh, they felt like they were my best friends who just wanted to help me in every way they could. And at the same time, what they're not publishing is by stacking up fees or percentages on you and then, taking financial action against you or legal action. Mm-hmm. So I think the biggest caveat I had in the way that people perceive the industry or factoring is if somebody has to sell you that they're going to be your friend or they're going to treat you like a friend, are you buying their friendship or are you buying a product that you really need? Chances are you know the answer to that. Chances are you don't really need the product or it's not very good for you, and they're trying to dress that up with friendship instead.
Find another way to get some friends.
Yeah.
A safer way, a less expensive way. Why do truck drivers sometimes use factoring companies?
Really, the long and short of it is to shorten payment periods. If they were to do the old snail mail paper check system, most truckers would take probably 30 to 60 days to get paid for every load that they run. Many truckers who are new to the workforce today are younger and of more of the modern view that society has, that credit is okay, instant gratification in a way. And they don't build a business plan that allows that 30 to 60 day cushion, and sometimes 90 days, sometimes 120, 180 days in a difficult arrangement. But it's really that instant gratification or the lack of a business plan that can allow them 30 to 60 days to get paid. And instead it's this mentality, and I'm guilty of it just as much as anyone else. I want it now. I don't want to wait. That's really where factoring plays on our human emotions, even as business people. They offer a chance to get paid 24 hours or less from when you drop a load and get your paperwork in place to say that it's been completed, get it to the broker or shipper, and on your end as a driver, everything's done, let's get paid.
Now, you touched on a lot of different things, but what is one of the main things you would say that people should understand when it comes to factoring companies?
I think it's really just the risk, and that's going to vary from factoring company to factoring company. Some are going to be very good to work with. They're going to charge you a low percentage. They're going to charge you very few fees in order to operate with them. But one thing that you will find rare with a factoring company is the ability to only factor certain loads. Almost universally, factoring companies require you to sign an agreement that says if you run 5 loads, got to factor them all. If you run 100, got to factor them all. You can't pick and choose which ones you want to do.
Now, you compared, in your session, you compared factoring to getting your very first credit card and some of the dangers that can come with that. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Sure. I think the first credit card analogy works because you do get the quick payment. You realize, hey, there's a little bit of interest I got to pay on this credit card, but no big deal. I'll keep up on my payments. Everything will be fine. I'll build some credit. I'll get the stuff that I want. I don't have to pay full price. All the benefits are there. But then as time goes, maybe something happens to you and you miss a payment, or you don't realize there was a fee in the agreement that they're going to charge you for not paying off your balance in a certain amount of time or things like that. And suddenly this great arrangement that you had starts to turn a little bit darker. And sometimes it's very mild with a credit card. I can speak from my own experience. If you miss a payment, maybe they'll call you up at first and say, hey, we missed your payment. Then the next time it happens, they just slam you on your credit report for a 30-day late pay or a 60-day late pay, whatever it might be. Then they're going to charge you the late pay fee that's going to show up on your next statement. And it just kind of turns into this almost like a washing machine cycle of, now I'm stuck in this and I'm kind of behind the 8 ball. And I try to make it right, or I try to do everything right, and I just can't still seem to get out from behind the 8 ball. It almost seems to be a moving target to get back on the straight and narrow with the factoring company at times.
Now, as you mentioned, OOIDA's position on factoring has always been to not do it, avoid it. But in your talk, you spoke about that, of course, but then you also spoke to those who have already factored and maybe in a bad position, and then also to the ones who feel like that's their only choice. Why was it important to kind of touch on all three of those things?
Sure. So to begin, if you're already factoring, I mostly wanted to sort of raise the flags for things that if you haven't already stepped in the bucket, they might be out there. Mostly if something goes bad with a load, a factoring company has the right to sort of take possession of that situation, and they can pay you, but then later look to claw that money back and say, hey, people didn't get paid on the other end. This thing never got completed correctly. And someone's got a freight claim against you or an equipment claim or whatever it might be. So step number one, if you're already in an existing factoring situation, is just to kind of know what the dangers are. Because you might be somebody who's been factoring for 10 years and never had a problem and say, well, I don't know what this guy's talking about. I've been going for 10 years and never had a single problem. That's great for that person. I'm happy for them. But at the same time, they should know that there are constantly storms brewing that could be blowing over them in a moment's notice. Number two, if you're looking to factor and you just have to, it's your business plan, or maybe something's gone wrong and put you in that business plan, I just want people to understand what they're getting into and that they have a choice in factoring. It's not necessarily, well, ABC Company was the only one I could get on with, and I just signed with them because I needed to get going. Well, ABC Company might be really freaking terrible, and it might be the kind of thing that if you'd shopped around a little bit, you would have found that maybe they don't have excessive fees with another factoring company, or the percentages are lower. Or lastly, you might find that there are actually some good factoring companies out there. And I really wanted to point that out as kind of the third point. If you got to do it, we've been saying for years, don't do it. We've been telling you all the dangers, but if you got to do it, do some research, find out, go to the IFA website, which is the International Factoring Association. If they're members of the IFA, they have been vetted by the IFA with their standards and their code of conduct or ethical standards, whatever you want to call them, to say this is an ethical company. Now, does that mean they're 100% the best people ever to deal with? Probably not. But we do know of factoring companies out there who can't get approval with the IFA that we've seen our people deal with. And those are the kind of people that we want you to deal with if you have to factor, as somebody who's been vetted by a third party, not just, OOIDA says that these guys can advertise on our airwaves, so they must be a good factoring company. That's not the way to do something like that.
Yeah.
So just kind of finally on that point, there is something out there called non-recourse factoring, which is a sort of a new setup that doesn't require you to be on the hook legally for a load that you factor with a factoring company. Now, right now, it's kind of in its infancy, and it's not what you would call a mainstream arrangement for a factoring company. But if you have to factor, get a non-recourse agreement. It's the best one for you as far as legal protections go.
And I'm curious, what was the reaction from those in the audience that listened to your session? I know you had a couple of questions, but did you have people approach you afterwards and to talk to you?
I did. I was there was something that kind of popped into my head about an hour before I went on that I thought, I wonder if there's going to be like 15 factoring companies watching this thing in person, just ready to hammer me with questions and argue with me. Surprisingly, I didn't get any of that. Mm-hmm. Pleasant surprise. But I did get some truckers who came to me after with just questions, or they wanted to talk about, each one of them was factoring. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to talk about their arrangements and just, hey, thanks for pointing this out. I didn't know that they could do this to me. Or I'm with a factoring company. One particular driver said, hey, I'm with one and I'm trying to get out of it, but I don't think my business plan's really going to allow it. And he said, it was encouraging for him to hear me say that there were some better arrangements out there, or that he didn't necessarily have to accept the situation he was in. There might be some better companies. Mm-hmm. So that was nice to have. And then I did have some colleagues in the crowd watching, and I had one colleague tell me later on that he overheard some people talking during the presentation, and one person who had been standing there watching, a buddy walked up and said, hey, what's this all about? And the guy says, oh, well, he's talking about factoring. His buddy says, well, what's factoring? He goes, well, I'm not really sure, but I know I don't want to do it. And to me, that was like, well, it was worth giving the talk if one person got that.
Exactly. And for anyone who was there, anyone who watches, you used a lot of movie references, which I loved. Talk to me about those.
Yeah, so one of my pet peeves, I've been a lawyer for almost 20 years now. One of my pet peeves is I have to go every year to continuing legal education. And those usually involve PowerPoint slides or some type of presentation. It's almost always someone standing up there just reading you their slides. Mm-hmm. So it's a pet peeve of mine to not be that person when it's come time to do a presentation. I'm kind of the eternal smart aleck, so I like to have fun and joke around and make a joke about most anything. So I do have a lot of media and movie clips in my presentation, just as a way to make my point. Each one of them is kind of, they're there for laughs and jokes, but at the same time, you can twist those media clips and say, okay, this is actually about factoring, and here's what's going on here. It's not just a funny movie clip so we can have a quick laugh and keep your attention.
Yeah, definitely. All related and all very entertaining. Well, Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
That was Paul Torlina talking about his Pro Talks session on factoring that he gave at the Mid-America Trucking Show. To see the full presentation, you can visit Landline Media on YouTube. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackbird. We'll have more after this.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Firestone tires are for more of everything, with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Find your local Firestone dealer today at bridgestonenationalfleet.com/4moremiles.
Today's rising costs affect everyone. Replace your harmonic damper with a genuine VibraTech TVD viscous damper to prevent costly repairs and downtime. Keep your money in your pocket and your truck on the road with VibraTech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Every week we check in with Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker. When is a headlight not a headlight? When is a turn signal something else? Well, it turns out that both of them are also basic communication devices that truckers can use to communicate with each other. But Marty thinks some truckers are forgetting the basic utility of their lights when it comes to getting in touch with other drivers out on the road.
Carolina west to Denver, up to Bangor, west to Austin, coast to coast, sea to sea, sail on, sail on.
Well, Marty, how are you doing?
I am lovely, Mark. And you?
Well, I'm doing fantastic. Where are you at right now?
I am over at the TA in Mount Vernon, Missouri, exit 46 off of I-44. And this particular one is owned by, it's a private franchise store. It's only a year old now, and a really nice place here. They own this one, the one across the interstate, and the one in Stratford, the Wilmot family. I just got to meet Brent. It was kind of funny when I was pulling up, I see this guy in the pickup hop out and pick up some trash and then start going on in. And it's like, you know what? That's got to be the owner.
Well, you know, it's nice to see the owner pitching in with the rest of the folks who work there.
Oh, yeah. Some of these guys, I mean, they're really on that front line wanting to do what's right for the drivers. And Brent, and I'm sure his son is the same way. I haven't got to meet him yet, but they're out there. I was watching them do clean windows and pump fuel for the guys. So it's, he really likes to put that service in there.
Well, very cool. Well, let's talk about some of the things that are coming up with the truckers who are stopping in to visit. And one of them that you brought up is headlights and turn signals. And what is it about these right now that's got people kind of thinking?
Well, the thought is people ought to use them, I think, more than anything. And some of the time I don't think people remember that it's a way of communicating with that other driver. And just like if you could pick up the phone and talk to them, you are basically saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and I would really appreciate knowing what you're going to do, whether it's turning your blinker on or like the trucks, they don't do it as much anymore, but turning off their headlights after a truck has passed them and is safe to come back over into that lane, whether it's on a 2-lane or 4-lane road. And then also using the 4-way flashers in case there's something happening up front that could be an issue. Doesn't always mean that there is, but 9 times out of 10, there is some sort of issue coming up. Whether it's you going too slow on the road and you want to let everybody know you're not up to speed yet, or like this morning, it's you don't see it very often. A highway patrol backing up down the interstate with his lights on. You start getting a little concerned. You throw on your flashers to let everybody know, hey, there's an issue going on up here. And sure enough, there was a big truck that came through the median and through the wire cable barriers that's supposed to stop that. That truck just came right on in over to our side of the interstate. I don't know what happened, or anything, but we need to let people know what's happening. And some of the time that's all we have. We have our blinkers and our lights to let people know, hey, there's a problem coming up. And that way they don't either cause more of a problem or they don't get themselves in a situation where they could cause a lot of harm by not paying attention.
Now, I know I'm asking for trouble by bringing this up, Marty, because every time I bring it up, it's a little bit of trouble. But you mentioned briefly dimming your headlights to signal someone that it's okay to come back in after passing. I've also known truckers who have flashed briefly their brights, just blink them. Have you heard from both sides, and which one would you say has the advantage in numbers?
Well, the numbers, depending on who you're talking to, an old guy or a younger guy. See, a lot of the younger guys, they have that little switch on the stock that you can just flash your bright lights just for a split second. And turning off your headlights is more cumbersome to do. A lot of times you have to lean down and turn the light switch off. So I do understand why people are tempted to just flash the lights. The bad thing about it, during the day, it's usually not a big deal, but during, the night, that big bright light, when you're looking back to see if there's room to come back over, that can make you, blind for a little bit of time. And so it could cause you problems, or the person that you're wanting to let them know that they can come over, you can cause them problems just by not being able to see for that little bit of time. And so I just like to turn them off, and then that way they know they're free, and somebody's not flashing their bright lights just to get their attention, not to let them come over. That's why whenever you turn off the lights, it's pretty well, people know that, hey, you're clear to come over.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely hear from someone about that.
Absolutely.
Oh, my gosh. Well, we got a little bit of time left, and there was a couple of other things you wanted to bring up, and I definitely want to talk about one of them, which is the parking situation. And Marty, from your point of view, what's the latest on that?
Well, a lot of people get upset about paid parking and all, and I get it, especially during times that rates aren't as good and fuel's still up, even though it seems to be dropping a little bit. It's not going leaps and bounds down. But there's so many solutions that we can have in the trucking industry. And I really hadn't thought about, when I would come home from driving the reefer, I would go over and I'd already talked to the manager of the truck stop, and I'd always park in the farthest spot so I'm not taking up a close one. But then after doing this job for this long and talking about all the parking challenges and that, I really see how it would have been a whole lot better to work with, like what we do now with Brian, on being able to park somewhere that's not in a truck stop. So anybody out there that's can find other solutions to parking your truck that aren't at truck stops, you're actually helping other people have that spot when they're looking for one. And I think if we would all think about that when we go home, can we park somewhere that's not at a truck stop to allow those guys that don't have that same option to have that spot?
Well, and certainly you've got some towns now, and we've reported on this, we've talked about it, but there are towns out there that are trying to stop people from parking their rigs at home. Some of them have already passed laws, and that creates a whole other dimension to the problem.
It really does, and that's where the challenge comes in. If you don't have a spot where you can, actually, I had the tractor parked at the house here the last couple of days, and so thankfully our town doesn't stop that from happening, but you never know.
Okay. Well, Marty, we're running out of time here, and I know you've got a lot of stuff going on heading in, and we'll certainly keep up with you. But in the meanwhile, do you have any final words before you go off riding into the sunset?
Hey, guys, just be kind to one another and give that guy next to you a break.
Brothers of the highway, children of the wind.
Once again, that was Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, the Spirit of the American Trucker. You can find Marty's next stop on our show and every day at our website, landlinenow.com. That includes truck stops, truck shows, and other special events across the country. Again, you can find that at landlinenow.com. And you can also find the Spirit's complete schedule at the OOIDA website, OOIDA.com. Just go to the main menu at the upper left corner of the page and under Membership, click on OOIDA on Tour. That's our program for today. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome,
and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.